Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and for this week's episode, I'm joined again, as I have been a handful of times before, Mr. Ben Langford.
Hello, hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
And
Again.
This week, we are going to be talking about one of the biggest franchises ever of the past 25 years. One of the most beloved franchises as well, actually. Lord of the Rings. And we're just talking about Lord of the Rings. We're not talking about the Hobbit films because I didn't have to want to watch those films again. And
Very
we're not
fair.
talking about the Ralph Bakshi 1977, I think it is, Lord of the Rings, or the 1980, The Return of the King. Yeah, Lord of the Rings. It's one of the it's a people really like Lord of the Rings. It's
I feel like an
a,
understatement.
a beloved, a modern classics, I would say. It was, a big deal. It was a very big deal. I was not alive when those films, the first two came out. I was not born yet. I was born when the third one came out, though. But Lord of the Rings, it was a long road to getting it made. It had been in the works. Well, it had been tried to be made for decades prior to Peter Jackson being able to making it. The Beatles, quite. I don't know. I assume you're aware of this, but the Beatles tried
Of course,
to get
yeah.
it made with Stanley Kubrick. And I'm just looking at
Yeah.
who the Beatles would have played. So it would have been Lennon would be playing Gollum, Paul McCartney as Frodo, George Harrison as Gandalf, and Ringo Starr as Sam. So
I wish we got that. I do want to live in the alternate universe where that got made, as well as the Jackson ones.
Yeah, and Stanley Kubrick was asked to make it, and he said no, and that it was unfilmable. And it's a bit like that is coming from Stanley Kubrick. Like that's really like when Stanley Kubrick doesn't want to say something's like unfilmable, it's it's a big deal. Like it's like, oh man, this would have been a nightmare to make. If Kubrick doesn't want anything to do with it.
Well, I'm curious if you read the books or like any like Middle Earth book.
Okay. I was gonna get onto this actually. I was gonna ask you if you'd read the book.
Okay.
Well, I was under the. I assume you have because
I have,
based
yes.
on. Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I know you're a fan of these films.
I do love, yes.
I've read The Hobbit. I think I've read The Hobbit. I've certainly read most. I had to do it for English at school, so I would have read it then. I have tried on several occasions to read Lord of the Rings, and then it just becomes like a few chapters in, it is just boring and incomprehensible, and I give up and say, no, I don't care enough to try and read these.
I've read The Hobbit. I actually reread The Hobbit over the summer, which was a really nice reread. The Hobbit's much more cozy. But the reason I brought it up is because I don't really get the unadaptable. Maybe like in the 60s it would have been unadaptable, but like I guess I feel like Lord of the Rings still has this like reputation of being like an unadaptable book, and I do find the books. I don't know. I think they're very. I mean, this is obviously if you have the budget, they're very easy stories to adapt. I feel like they're very like a classical like structure, and like the lore isn't that like I don't really care about lore like in anything. Like there's not a lot of franchises I really care about. Like the only ones I could like list off are like The Matrix and Lord of the Rings, and that's kind of where it ends for like franchises I really am passionate about. I mean, just if we're going to get into the films and why I love them so much, is I just love the fellowship. I love all the characters that they come across. It's just a really like.
Okay.
I think that's what's really strong about them to me is that I really connect to like Frodo's journey. I love Sam. I love all like everyone in the fellowship. Like it's hard for me to pick a favorite character because I have like 10 that are fighting for that spot. Yeah, I
Mm,
just love their journey. I love Hobbiton. Like I love where it starts, and I love like every. Yeah, I mean these movies are just a really like cozy comfort watch for me. They're just really like I don't know. There's something about the world that I really connect to, and something about the characters that really like. Because I'm not really a big fantasy person. Like I like Game of Thrones fine. I like Harry Potter fine. Like, they're
mm,
good. I've seen them
yeah.
all, and I enjoy them. But Lord of the Rings, there's something special about it to me that really connects deeper. I don't know.
I don't know what it is. I think here's I think part of the reason I find fantasy so annoying is that the people who love fantasy can be really irritating. Like
Mhm.
who dress up and they go to like Renaissance fairs and they make it
Mm.
like their personality and they're like, oh, Lord of the Rings, greatest films of all time. And they go on about all these films and it's just like fantasy is just a genre I don't really like. Honestly, probably if I was to pick my favorite fantasy film, I'd probably pick like Army of Darkness. Like, and that's not,
Mm.
and that's like a
Yeah, you
very, and
count
that's
that.
like a
I count that.
well, no, I would say it is, but it's a subversion of the genre. It's not
Right.
quite
It's
the,
almost a parody. Yeah.
but yeah, no, I would definitely say it is a. I would definitely say it is a fantasy film, but it's not like a traditional fantasy film in the way that Lord of the Rings is fantasy or Game of Thrones is fantasy. It's sort of
Sure.
a subversion of that. And I think that's the
Hmm.
bit. I think the thing that puts me off because I'm gonna be less positive than you on these films.
I can
I
tell.
think that I think the thing that bothers me is I think a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people who I don't know if I've definitely talked about this. I don't know if it's been on the podcast or not, or if it did. I don't know if it stayed in or not. I like adapting books to films, and there's sort of some people like, oh, this bit from the books isn't in it, and it's like, well, it probably didn't need to be in there because because like books, you don't need everything in a book a lot of the time. Like there's stuff you can cut out. Like for the longest time I heard about this Tom Bombadil character who's in the book, and from my
Mhm.
understanding, you don't really need him. Like it's fine to just cut his character out because it doesn't add anything
Mhm.
to the. And these films are already like 3 hours long. Okay, we don't need more. I just think a lot of people are very yeah. There's just something about fantasy and the the types of people it attracts that I don't care for, and that's not the fault of the films or the genre. It's just the people who like it. Like, and not all people are like this, obviously, but there are definitely some people
Mhm.
who are like, God, is this just your only personality trait? You just
It
like,
makes it harder to engage with the media for sure. I have things like that. Like I don't really care about like superhero characters and like stories. Like when it gets
mm,
extra, when it's like the people that like overly glaze anything in that genre, it just makes it less appealing to me because of how like
yeah,
culty it
no,
can feel. So that's
I
kind of my
totally,
equivalent.
yeah, I agree. Like, I enjoy superhero films, but I don't. I think people can be a bit silly about them, and I just like, okay,
Like the
guys,
real
let's
soups.
just. This is like, sure, I like this film, but this isn't like a
Hmm.
great. It's like the recent
Well,
Deadpool, for example. Everyone
mhm.
there's a lot of people like, "Oh god, this is saving the MCU," but it's like, it's not even top 15 MCU. Like, what are you like,
Mhm.
I like it. I think it's good, but, like, I don't it's nowhere
Mhm.
near the best of what the MCU has done. I mean, yeah, speaking of going back to the film, I rewatched the films for the purposes of this. I did have to watch
Mhm.
them at a faster speed just so I can make sure I got them all watched in time.
In
And
time.
I would typically
That's
not do
fair. I'm
that.
sure you've seen
Like
it before.
I've seen them before, yes. I typically would not do that. I'm not an insane person who just watches all films like that because that's just mental.
Mhm.
But I just sort of add. So I watched these. They're all on Netflix. I was like, great. I'll just watch them. And then the non-extended editions, which I'd never seen actually, except for Two Towers. I'd
Mm.
seen Two Towers non-extended because they had been taped off of TV for me to watch. But this is the first time I have seen these films in about 10 years. Like it's I genuinely cannot remember the last time
Mm.
I've seen this film. It is pre high school, and I started high school in 2016, so it's been 8 years at a minimum, if not longer. I'm gonna say 10 because I think it might be 10. And I guess sort of my history with these films was I don't remember how old I was when I first saw them. My dad was a big fan of them, and I
Mhm.
remember he sat me down. He said, "We're gonna watch Lord of the Rings today." So he so it's the extended editions is the versions of the films we have. I don't remember like when we stopped, but basically it was like in the morning. He got some he got some like fish and chips for lunch, which we ate while we were
Mhm.
watching, and then we just
Nice.
watched the Fellowship of the Ring. So that's sort of when I first watched them, and I remember really enjoying them, but
Mhm.
I having rewatched them, I definitely don't like them as much as I
Mhm.
remember liking them. And I think there are and hopefully you'll be able to uh well, I'm sure you will probably disagree, so you can explain why I
Right,
am.
that's the beauty of film, you know?
But no, I think there are that look, and I don't dislike these films. I'm gonna sound very negative, I feel like, but I do
Mhm.
not dislike these films. I want to make it clear. I do not think these are bad films. There's a lot that on rewatching them, I was like, oh, I don't remember this, or oh, this is actually not that good. It's not
Mhm.
all of it. There are certain elements that sort of didn't work for me. I want to talk about Peter Jackson. It's an interesting choice for director, I guess, on paper,
Mhm.
because he's not because prior to uh doing Lord of the Rings, he'd worked a lot in horror. I mean, just looking at his films he'd made before, and he made Bad Taste, which is a really low budget debut that took like 4 years to make. He did Meet the Feebles, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm aware it's got lots of like puppets and shit like that.
Mhm.
Um, Brain Dead, which I think is a really solid film. Again, very low budget though. You can tell it's a very low budget film. Heavenly Creatures, which is sort of a bit more of a drama, and then you've got The Frighteners, which sort of is this big effects uh, uh, film that also helped sort of get Weta Workshop off the ground, I guess.
I've actually seen all of his films, and I actually okay, I'm not gonna say I like all of them, but I think his everything he's made is quite interesting. That would be my, he hasn't made like like on a movie that you shouldn't watch, I would say. Kinda similar to someone like Spike Lee, which is a weird comparison, but, like, even Peter Jackson's, like, not good movies, I think you should like, Bad Taste isn't good. Meet the Feebles isn't good, but I would recommend people watch them. I don't even like
Well,
the Lovely Bones that much, but I think it's interesting. I don't know, like, everything he makes has some level of intrigue to it.
I would describe myself as a big Peter Jackson fan. I like
Mhm,
Bad Taste. I think for what it is, it's an incredibly well accomplished debut. It's in the vein of stuff like The Evil Dead and that kind of thing, where it's like
mhm.
this is clearly made with like no money, like absolutely fuck all,
Yeah,
and it's still accomplished. I don't think it's as good as like The Evil Dead. I think The Evil Dead is like one of the strongest debut
sure.
films in general. But I think for what it is, I think Bad Taste works as a little debut film. But then yeah, you've got Brain Dead, which I think is a really fun zombie
Brain Dead's great.
film. Heavenly
Mhm,
Creatures is a really quite solid little drama.
mhm.
With was
That's
it
my
Kate
favorite of
Winslet
his that's not Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Kate Winslet.
and
That was her not
M-
her debut, but it was one of her it
Melanie
was like her breakout.
Linsky?
Yes, yeah, those are
Sim
that too.
is the
But that
other
was, like,
woman
a pretty early
girl.
Kate Winslet performance.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it
that's
was her debut, actually.
pre-Titanic. Yeah, I think it
Yeah, that might have been
was
what got her Titanic.
yeah, I think it was Melanie Linsky's debut as well, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, which is
But then, yeah,
crazy,
you've
and
got The
then I think
Frighteners, which is, I
very
mean,
fun.
that's my favorite Peter Jackson film. I think The Frighteners is
Oh,
a
cool.
remarkable piece of work. I think it's, yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's in my
Incredibly
100 favorite films, so I think it's
okay, cool.
a
Yeah, it's incredibly
remarkable.
underrated.
I think it is. I think it's not really talk. Well, I think the thing with Peter Jackson is when you ask people their favorite film of his, a lot of
Mhm.
people are going to say, "Oh yeah, Lord of the Rings," and it's like, well, everyone says Lord of the
But I do
Rings,
think,
but
like Braindead has kind of a following now. I don't think that The Frighteners has picked up, like, like, a similar, like, traction. I don't know, I feel like it still hasn't gone there yet.
I think Peter Jackson on the whole is good. I haven't seen his King Kong film yet, but I mean it's
Oh,
three
that's
hours and that's
cool.
long.
Yeah,
That's a very
it's a
long
good
runtime.
movie.
The Lovely
It's not
Bones I've
it's not
started
as good
to
as the
see.
33 one.
And then the Hobbit films, which are not good films. On the whole, I would describe myself as a Peter Jackson fan. He has seemingly
Mhm,
stopped making like non-Beatles, non-documentary film. Like he seemingly just sort of
mhm.
committed himself to making Beatles and documentary films, which is,
Yeah,
I think, a bit of a
documentary.
shame because I think
Mhm,
he can do a lot more than that, and he uh, is a very I think he can do more than that. So I think him sort of
mhm,
moving away from I think if Peter Jackson wanted to make another brain dead as that could absolutely do has seemingly sort of
mhm,
decided to not, which I think is disappointing because I think he's
mhm,
a great talent, and so now that he sort of just stopped, tragic. I think because and to be honest, I think doing the Hobbit films definitely. I mean, if you see behind the scenes material for those Hobbit films, he is
oh, yeah, it's really
not
sad.
having a
It's very
good
sad to
time.
watch, especially the Lord of the Rings one is so much he looks so alive in those, and he looks, like, just
Yeah.
dead in the Hobbit
And,
ones.
and and
But,
I mean, he has admitted he didn't want to do the Hobbit films. He was like, "No, I don't want to do these
mhm,
films." And then he was
yeah,
sort of
I
forced
could see
into it
him
because Del Toro is like,
I could
"Nah, I'm good."
yeah, I could see him slipping back into a narrative. It would be more of, like, a lovely book.
To be honest, I think if he had ended his career at Lord, if he said he'd like, "I'm gonna stop making films," I think that would probably be fine. If I'm being honest, I think
Mhm, it'd
it
be
probably would have been
justified.
alright because he made
Mhm,
the biggest films of all time, won
mhm,
all the Oscars. Like, what,
yeah,
11 Oscars Return of the King won? Like, one of the
yep,
biggest, like,
every one it was
winning
nominated for.
everything, which is like that doesn't happen now. Like sweeps like that just don't occur, except for the last two
Mhm.
years when Oppenheimer and Everything
But even
Everywhere.
then, it's not as yeah, not to
There's
the
still
same degree.
like 7 wins for those films, 6 wins, like
Mhm.
a lot of wins, but
Yeah,
I don't
Lord of the
know if
Rings won
we'll ever
half of the ceremony.
Yeah, I don't know if, and I mean, it was eligible for only like 14 Oscars, so it got 11 of 14 potential nominations or something. Like,
Mhm. Just to get any acting.
yeah, which I it doesn't surprise me, to be honest.
Mhm.
I'm not that surprised it didn't get acting nominations. Certainly not for
Yeah, I guess
like
it's hard with
an
such a big
act.
ensemble.
Yeah, certainly not for actress because there aren't many female characters in these films. Like, my God,
There's definitely not a
and
lead
that's
actress, yeah.
definitely there's no lead actress. I think it would have been a supporting actress, but to
Right.
I guess since to talk about the characters, there's a lot of characters in these films. This is going to be one of the parts where we disagree because I don't agree. I think there are some good characters. There are some characters I like, and then there are some that I don't like and I think are incredibly underdeveloped and kind of don't do much. I mean, I guess to
Hmm.
sort of talk about the main man, Elijah Wood, the
Mhm.
protagonist of this. I mean, first of all, he has not
Yes.
aged in like 20 years. It is insane. Like he still
Mhm.
basically looks the same. It's insane. Elijah Wood, yeah, the protagonist of this trilogy. I like Elijah Wood. I don't think he's like an amazing actor or anything, but I think he's good. I think
Mhm.
he's a solid. He's a decent actor. You know, you're not gonna get like anything. I don't think you're gonna get like any amazing performances from him per se, but he's not a bad actor. But you know, he's not the only character. There's what, Sean Astin, is that that's Sam
Mhm.
Wise?
Yeah, he's great.
Uh, he's all right. He's one of the better characters.
Oh.
I think he's decent. I think the thing is sort of with these films is I don't think the opportunities for like amazing acting is that
Mhm.
prevalent in these films, and that's not a complaint about the films. It's more just an observation. I don't think the opportunities are quite there to have like these incredible acting performances. Like it because well, it is a an ensemble piece, so it is hard to sort of I guess stand out a bit more in this kind of film.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't think any of the performances are, like, incredible, but I think they all work for what they're going for.
I mean, I this film sort of launched the careers, I feel like, of some of these actors for
Mhm.
better and for worse in some situations. I mean, it's like Elijah Wood, he had done films prior. He'd done Back to the Future 2 by this point. He'd done some other sort of smaller films. But I feel like this really got him noticed.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, he was in Eternal Sunshine the year after Return of the King, I think? Yeah, it was the year after.
Yeah. Dominic
Oh, yeah.
Monaghan.
Yes. And what's the other ones? I forget their names because 'cause they're obviously look very similar.
Uh, what is it? Billy Boyd is Pippin.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. No, they're very I mean, they're like the comedic relief basically, and they're both very good.
Yeah, they are the comedic injection in this film.
Because I think there's a lot of, like, part 1s, part 2s where they don't work on their own, you kinda need the rest of the story, but I think, like, across all 3 of these, they work well as, like, individual films, like, especially
Mm,
Fellowship. I think if somehow Fellowship was the only Lord of the Rings movie, I think the first one worked really well as a standalone.
I don't know if I agree personally. I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
that's one of
I can tell that's the one.
that's one of the big stumbling blocks for these films. I've made it clear on this show before, and in just general, I really don't like when films just sort of end and just say
Mhm.
come back next time. And I think these films, I think again, I don't dislike these films because I think there's a lot of stuff beforehand that I like. If I'm like Dune, for example, I think is
Mhm.
shit, and I don't think
Okay.
that. And if I was enjoying all the stuff beforehand, then I probably wouldn't hate them. But the problem is, I don't care about any of that film beforehand, and then it just doesn't have an ending, and it's like, oh, well, what was the point of that? It's like Across the Spider Verse last year was the exact
Mhm.
same thing. I was having an absolute
Yeah.
blast with that film. I thought it was fantastic, and then it does not end, and that is so irritating to me because it could
Yeah,
have.
it's
Like
very annoying in those ones.
it's not it's very easy to have ended like Across the Spider Verse. Like just cut it earlier. Just have that scene with Gwen and her dad. That's the final scene.
I think it works well
Um,
as, like, a multi-part story. I think it also, like, the book I mean, the book is 3 books, I guess that it had to be
yeah,
that way. It's not like it's not like The Hobbit or Wicked where you're taking one text and splitting it apart. Like it
Yeah,
follows
I
the
mean,
beats of when each story starts and ends, and I think they're
yeah,
all
I mean, Lord of the
satisfying films.
Rings. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't love the because I just like there's no ending on this film. I mean, but I was enjoying elements of the films earlier on, so I was just like, okay, it's it's annoying, but like I don't dislike this. But yeah, there's lots of I mean, there's so many just famous people. There's Ian McKellen as Gandalf, and I
Oh
think
yeah, the
Ian
cast
McKellen
is insane.
is a great actor. Viggo Mortensen, I think,
Mhm.
is a great actor. Orlando Bloom is one of the most bland actors in just the history of cinema, though. And I think
Interesting.
he's really boring. And Legolas is just not a character. Like I really don't think
Mhm.
Legolas of the Fellowship, he is the least developed, and he's in
I
all
think he's
three
my
of the
least favorite. Yeah.
like Sean Bean has more development, and he dies in the first film.
Mhm.
Like Sean
Yeah,
Bean
Boromir's a great
I think
character.
Sean Bean's probably the best performance in any of these films. I think Sean Bean is actually really quite
Hmm.
good. I think he
I can get
does some
behind that.
really good stuff. There's like there's the scene towards the end of Fellowship where it's him and Frodo in the woods, and I think
Mhm.
he
Oh, great scene. Yeah.
yeah, I think Sean Bean's probably the best performance in any of these films. I think he's genuinely really good.
Mhm.
But because it's Sean Bean, he has to die. Because he so he
Yeah, his
dies,
signature.
which is fair enough. Like I understand that you need to have a bit of stakes and you have to kill off characters. Like I think that is kind of an issue with some blockbuster films where it's like just kill a character. Like don't like. I think some where they're sort of unwilling to. I mean, I guess I understand this is based off a book and everything, so they're sort of
Mhm.
beholden to the book to a degree. I think
Right.
I am okay with filmmakers taking creative liberties and being like, well, it doesn't work for the story we want to tell, so we're going to change this. Like I'm all on board with filmmakers making changes. I know some people are like, no, this must be
Mhm.
100% directly like the exact same as the books, and you can't make any changes to it. I'm like, no, changes are
Right.
fine. I'm all on board with changes if it makes a better story. Like if you're like change like within reason, obviously. Like like within reason, I'm fine with changes. But like if you're making because you there are things you're going to have to change when you're adapting a book. You're adapting a completely different medium. You're adapting a medium that's completely different. So I'm all on board with films making changes from books. I'm not beholden to
Mhm.
that. But I'm not. I mean, how do you feel about films making changes when adapting books?
I mean, yeah, I'm definitely not one who's like thinks that something should be like religiously follow a text. I think that as long as the changes are for the better, I think
Mhm,
that's it's fine to change things. Like, I mean, if I don't know, I just view them as separate things, to be honest. Like, to me, a film adapting a book, I'm not going to compare it to the book really, because I just find it's like
mhm,
it's hard to compare books to film. Like, they're completely different experiences in terms
mhm,
of storytelling. Um, yeah, like I mean, any book I've read that has been turned to a movie, things have changed. Like, you have to. Like, even like, I mean, I saw Wicked, and like they had to change a lot from the play. Like, that's just when you're adapting something from different mediums, things have to be adjusted. So, I don't know. As long as they don't
mhm,
do anything like I don't know. Like, it's like in the Lord of the Rings movies, if they cut out like Sam saving Frodo, if they cut out something like that, then I would not be happy with that change. But like, there's not really a change that I dislike that they do from the books. I think all of it is
mhm.
pretty understandable.
Yeah, I mean these films. I mean there's so many characters. There's so many actors. You've got Brad Dourif as Greenwell Wormtongue. I know he's not like the biggest actor, but I'm aware of him.
Hmm.
There's Christopher Lee as Saruman, who,
Oh
if
yeah, of
you don't watch
course.
the extended edition of Return of the King, is just not in the
I
film,
don't know what
which is
happened to
so
him.
weird.
Yeah, that's a very
That
strange decision.
that's such a weird decision because it's like
And
he
his ending
has
in
a
the
death.
extended is also not satisfying.
I mean, it's not a great. I don't remember. It's not amazing, no.
He
but
just, like, falls off the tower, it's not very good, but they
yeah,
still
well, I
stand.
think doesn't he get attacked by Grima Wormtongue? Am I misremembering that, or does he just?
Yes. No, yeah, that is what happens, but it's, like, in the first,
Yeah,
like, 30 minutes. It's very, like,
yeah,
kind of thrown to the side, which I'm
yeah.
not the
It
biggest fan of that, but also, like, that's a hard thing with these movies is, like, do you judge them by the extended cuts? Do you judge them by theatrical? Do you judge them just separately?
well,
Like, it's a
yeah.
hard thing to, like, there are
Mm,
issues with the pacing in the extended cuts, but also, like, that's kind of why I watch the extended like, I can't really fault that because it's kind of the point of extended cuts. It's like, you're just
mhm,
getting more and you're, like, accepting that when you watch it. Because
mhm,
I mean, I guess I really went through my Lord of the Rings journey. It's pretty quick, but I watched and read them all, like, in I think freshman year of high school, I really, like, fell in love with the series. Like, I think it was the summer
mhm,
before high school, and then just really, like, adored them, became some of my favorite films, favorite books, and then over in fall of 2022. I think it was to tie in with the show, but I never watched the show. I watched like the first episode. That's its own
mhm.
story, but they released all three of them in like IMAX and theaters. It was like one every night for 3 nights in a row, and they were the extended version. And I don't think I
Mhm.
had seen the extended versions when I originally watched them, so that was my first time engaging with them. Which
Okay.
when I first watched the series, the second one was my favorite, but I think that was the only
Mhm.
one for me that dragged a bit in the extended version. So I wonder if like if I rewatched theatrical, I would still prefer that one to the others. But I do think my ranking goes one, three, two. But I do kind of view it all as one. It's hard to.
Mm,
I think one's just my favorite because I like the Shire stuff the most. But
mm.
yeah, I think two
Well,
used
I
to be my favorite because I love Gollum, but I'm not as insanely obsessed with
mm,
him as I used to be.
yeah, well, I'd say they get better as they go along. I think Fellowship is the worst one. And in my
Okay.
memory, I always
I mean,
had
I
Two
can't judge.
Towers down as. In my memory, I thought Two Towers was the worst one, but I don't think it is actually. And I think part of it is that you've got Gollum in Two Towers, who I think is
Mhm.
good.
A
I
great
like Gollum.
character.
I think rewatching it, I do think people overstate how amazing of a character and performance that is. Like, not that it's not a good
Mm.
performance, not that it's, but I think Andy Serkis has given much better. I mean, Caesar in the Planet of the Apes films is a much better character and a much better performance, if you ask me. And not that
Hmm.
Gollum isn't, like, obviously it requires a lot from an actor, I think, but also it's not.
Sure.
It is kind of just a very standard, like, I don't know. It's not like the most. I think people overstate somewhat how incredible it is in terms of like,
Mhm.
oh, what he did to create the character, because it's like, well, he kind of just does sort of the voice that you would kind of expect. And I'm
Mhm.
not a fan of, he just says, like, when he coughs, he just says Gollum. He it like because sort of my
Oh.
understanding is, how I would take it is, he sort of coughs and it sounds like Gollum, but he's literally just saying the word Gollum, and I don't think that works. I think that's a bit silly. I think if it was
He
played
is kind of
more
a
of
silly
he,
character.
yeah, but I don't think that's really much. I think it just doesn't work because it just is
That's
like,
fair.
okay, he's just saying Gollum when he could. And again,
Mhm.
it's I really love the idea of him. That's his
Mhm.
name. He sort of, and it sounds like Gollum, but he just says it. So it's like, I don't like this as much. But I think it's good. I think obviously for what it meant, like, it was, very revolutionary. You hadn't really had that happen. You hadn't really had a full motion capture character on, like, uh set, really. Like, you hadn't had that before in a film, really. So I think there's a
Mhm.
lot to, yeah, respect about it. And I do like Gollum. I think there's some really solid scenes with him. I think
Mhm.
they do a good job of bringing some humanity to the character and making Gollum, not just this evil, like, this I mean, there's the scene where Gollum is like talking to himself, and I think we talked about this when we did Paddington, because Hugh
Mhm.
Grant has a scene where he's talking to, like,
Mm,
different
yes. Similar
versions of
characters.
himself, and I think,
Yes,
and
yes.
again, I think Gollum, it's a very, it's a good scene, but I think I would put the scene in Spider-Man that came out the same year as Two Towers when Willem Dafoe is talking to himself in the mirror. I think that is a remarkable scene in that film. Whereas I think Lord of the Rings,
Mm,
it just doesn't quite. I don't know. There's something about it. I mean, I will say this. I mean, Willem Dafoe is a much, much better actor than Andy Serkis. So I don't know how much
mm,
of that is part of that, but I think it just sort of, yeah. It's not that it's bad. It's just I've seen it better, and I'm no, I don't
mhm.
prefer the Hugh Grant one, but the Hugh Grant one is just a good bit of fun in that.
It's great,
I
yeah.
like it's really fun, and also I think because Hugh Grant just showing the scenery is fun, and I think
Mhm.
I don't understand.
Did you think it was coincidence? So many good things all happening for you. All for you, Norman.
What do you want?
To say what you won't. To do what you can't. To remove those in your way.
The board members. You killed them.
We killed them.
We?
Remember your little accident in the laboratory?
No. Master? Yes, precious. False. They will cheat you, hurt you, lie. Master's my friend. You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. Not listening. Not listening. You're a liar. And a thief. No. Murderer. Go away. Go away! I hate you. I hate you.
Turned out to be quite a stroke. I like that bear turning up when he did. Coppers think he done it. We're in the clear. Indeed, Magwitch. And we gave quite a performance, you and I. Just like the old days. Why the lemon face, Hamlet?
If you have something to say, I beg you share it with us all. It is not, nor it cannot come to good. Oh, really?
yeah, no, I don't dislike Gollum or that scene where he's like talking to himself because it is it is not like it's not like an easy thing for an actor to do to sort of be playing sort of two different people at once. Like that's obviously not a an easy thing, but I think that again, it's one of those things where I think people overstate how great it is. Um,
It's interesting that you bring up the Raimi movies because I do think there's also you can make a case that Peter Jackson brings some of his horror sensibilities into the franchise here, which I do think adds a lot of
mhm.
fun to it. Like there's a lot of fun filmmaking techniques he uses that feel like heightened versions of stuff from like Brain Dead. Just like kind of I don't know, he
Yeah.
has fun with like is the filmmaking here, which I'm glad that's not lost because I mean now obviously you see a lot of like independent or like interesting filmmakers that get put on like a big project and they kind of lose their voice. But like Peter Jackson, this feels like very much his vision, which it's really cool that like you can see like something of this scale. Like I guess you can kind of argue that Denis is doing that with Dune, but I think Lord of the Rings is
Mm.
much more interesting than Dune. But
Oh god,
yeah, it's
yeah.
always cool to see like someone's like like if you watch like I watched obviously my first Peter Jackson movies were Lord of the Rings trilogy, but like I went and watched Brain Dead, and then I went back and rewatched Lord of the Rings. And it's like, oh, you can kind of see like so like
Mm.
the way he shoots, like I don't know, the scenes with like Shelob, like there's like this fun horror vibe to it, which is so cool to see
Mhm.
in like these huge fantasy films. I don't know, it brings a
Yeah.
unique flavor to like a genre that's very tired. Like you kind of know what to expect from the fantasy genre at this scale, but like Lord of the Rings has its own unique style, which I
Mhm.
think I underestimated when I was younger, but appreciate more
Yeah.
now.
And I think that these films I mean, I I want to talk about this. These films are very long. These are
Mhm.
3 hour plus long films in cases, and I don't need all of it. Probably one of the worst, my least favorite element in any of these films is the Treebeard stuff in Two Towers. I really don't like Treebeard. I think that the film comes to a
Okay.
grinding halt when it cuts back to Treebeard, and it's just like, oh, fucking come on, and like in the standard edition, there's not that much. Like the extended edition, there is a lot more Treebeard, and that's just really annoying. And I want to point this out that when they first meet Treebeard, they call him a tree, and he's like, I don't call me a tree, and it's like I'm an ent, and it's like, "No," and then he says, my name is Treebeard, and then he says later on, these
Mhm.
trees are my friends, and it's just like, what the, that's just so, just really,
Lots of tree
I don't,
talk.
let's like, it's just like, no, mate, you are a tree, and that's fine. You're a walking, talking tree. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't be offended when people call you a tree, because it's like your name is Treebeard, and you are, you know, a tree. Like I don't. It's just so
Mhm.
believe me, that's not my biggest
I
issue with
like
these films.
Treebeard. I think he's cute.
It's just so, I also think it's weird that they cast John Rhys Davies as the guy to voice him. I'm like, could we not have gotten
Oh,
like a?
right, he plays both.
I
Or
don't
he
know.
plays
I feel
Gimli
like
and
we could
yeah.
have maybe gotten a better actor, like an actual voice
Mhm.
actor, can instead of just someone who is not a voice actor. Like I really
Who's
get
already on
annoyed when
set.
films don't cast voice actors for animated characters in animated films. I'm like, why? What are you doing? Just cast voice actors. Like that's literally their job. Like they're good at
Mhm.
it. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't like the Treebeard stuff at all. I think it's very dull and just doesn't do much. It's like they don't come back in the third film really. Like they're barely referenced again. It's just, it feels like a very unnecessary tangent. That's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if we needed this really.
That's valid.
And I think to be honest, all of these films have sort of elements where it cuts to it, and I'm just like, I don't care about this at all. Like the first film, I mean, the first one takes a long time getting things like set up. Like there is a
Mhm.
lot of setup before. There's a big exposition dump, like the first 7 minutes of Fellowship, and I'm just like, I don't,
Right.
I don't think you necessarily. I think you can put that in later. I don't know if putting that in, because I think you could edit it in a way where you sort of just meet these characters, and then you sort of got the stuff with the ring, and you sort of, when Bilbo like puts the
Mhm.
ring on and everything, and you sort of can build to like, oh, you've got sort of everything sort of seems quite normal at first. You meet Gandalf, you meet Frodo, you meet Bilbo, and then you've got like that scene where Bilbo's talking in the house of like, oh, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
like, you could have all this.
See,
I
it's
think
funny.
just
That's
having
my
all,
favorite stuff in the movie or in the
oh,
series is like the stuff at the Hobbiton or the Shire. I
oh
forget
yeah,
what you mean.
I think that just because I think just first of all, I think a lot of the time exposition is really like difficult to do correctly, and I think there would be
Mhm.
a much easier way of doing it, of having like Gandalf explaining it to Frodo, because Frodo wouldn't know. I think it's reasonable
Mhm.
for Frodo to not know, and then you can have this exposition where he explains the backstory to Frodo. I think it would fit a lot better there. There isn't much in terms of like, it's just an evil ring. There's not really much else to it. It's just a ring that is evil. There's
Mhm.
really not a lot to the film in terms of like what it's saying. It's sort of a very sort of like good versus evil story, which is like fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just think, yeah, there's a bit, I don't know. The ring doesn't really represent much beyond evil, and I think there is the
Mhm.
possibility that they could have made it be. I don't know. I think there's a realm where they could have restructured things and made it have a bit more like be a bit more represent something a bit more than just evil. You know, I think it could represent I don't know, something like not well, I mean, it could represent like a dick. I mean, it kind of
It
is
kind of
like an
does.
addicting thing. It kind of does, but it
Yes.
doesn't feel like it truly. It does explore it
Doesn't fully go down
to
that
a
route.
degree, but I think there's more that they could explore with it.
Yeah, I guess like I mean I find the stories to these movies very simple, which is another reason why I find the unadaptable like allocations kind of silly because I feel like it's a pretty
Mm.
simple hero's no maybe not a hero's journey, but it's just a very simple structured story. Like
Yeah.
people dumb it down to this, but which I think is reductive. People like they walk to the volcano and they walk back, which I know that's like kind of the joke of these movies is like it's just people walking for 9
Just
hours,
people
but I don't agree
walking.
with that. But I do think it's like a very simple, like, it's you can like I think kids could watch Lord of the Rings and get a lot of I think, people in their 70s, 80s can watch Lord of the Rings. I think it's a very like universal story, and I think it's timeless. Like I could see. I mean, the books have been around forever, probably like what, like 80 years at this point. I think they're written in the 40s
Y-
or the 30s.
I
They've been around for a while.
yeah, a long time.
Hmm. And I think there's nothing in them that's like, ooh, Lord of the Rings has that one thing you can't talk like they're really like timeless and really like I don't know. I think they'll stick around forever.
But yeah, there's another element that I really don't care for, and it's in Return of the King. It's the Witch King bit where
Hmm.
Eowyn is like, I am like where he's like, oh, no man can kill me, and she's like, I am no man, and she stabs him. And I
Mm.
just think
Hmm.
that's very I think it's a very weird like I don't care for it as like a as
Mm.
like a woman. Well, because I did some reading on this, and it's not in the film as far as I can tell, which is not a good thing, by the way. I don't like it
Hmm.
when people are like, "Oh, you have to read the books. You have to read this." Is like, no, I don't. I shouldn't have to do
Right.
that. A film should be able
Yeah.
to stand on its own. So I was like, "Is there a
Hmm.
bit I'm missing?" Like, and there is like this prophecy or something that like
Hmm.
about killing the Witch King, but from my understanding, it's not in the film at all. So it's just kind of like from just the way it plays in the film, it's just like only a woman could have killed the Witch King,
Mm.
and it's just like that's a bit interesting. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
kind of forgot
And
about
then
that
it's a bit.
honestly. Yeah. But
I
I
just
think I
find
don't
it
know,
a
I like that moment in the movie, honestly. I think it works for the it doesn't feel like a I don't know, like an audience like but like pushing like I don't know, I'm trying like I hate talking about this kind of stuff because it just is like part of like the cesspool of like, wokeness and people that talk about people that use that word unironically and stuff like. But I think
well,
if you
yeah.
compare it to like other moments that are kind of going for like a similar thing, I think it feels natural in the film. But I also just really like her character.
I mean, it's one of the only times a female character in the films like gets to do
Does
anything.
something, yeah.
There,
Hmm.
like, there's like what? How like there's like three major female characters. There's
Yeah, about
Galadriel.
three.
There's
Yeah, Erwin
Arwen.
and
Yeah, Eowyn,
Arwen.
and
Sorry,
that's
yeah.
kind of it. There's no other. There's like other female
Hmm.
characters, but they're not really major. And I mean, Arwen's whole
Yeah,
thing is just looking sad for most of the
and
film.
she's
It's
like the love
just
interest.
she's just the
I
love
mean, to be
interest
fair.
who is also gonna die because of the ring or something, which is a bit
Mhm.
of an interesting.
To be fair, I do think part of the story is about male friendship. So I don't think it's like it doesn't feel like it's. I mean, I'm also saying this as a male, so take that with a grain of salt. But I do think that part of the film is that it's like about like male camaraderie, and I think that's sort of the point. I don't know. I don't find it like an
Mhm.
exclusionary film or set of films, and I
No,
think you
I
could
don't.
back that up
Yeah,
with like the fan base being like. I think a lot of the Lord of the Rings fan base is like female, which obviously would be better if we had someone female who's speaking for that. But like, I do think that doesn't feel like this is a man's movie. I don't know. Like it's not like The
No,
Expendables or something. Very, you know,
no, it doesn't feel like it's a film for men.
this
Like
one's for the
it's
guys. Yeah,
yeah, no, I
it's not like a
I
male
think
gaze or anything. But again, we're talking about this as two men, so take
yeah,
how you will.
and there's also I really noticed it on this rewatch that like Frodo and Sam, it's like, are they like? I mean, I know I like they didn't, but I'm like they could have very easily been a couple. Like there's definitely like
Hmm.
a
Oh
bit
yeah, I
of it.
mean,
Like that's
you can't
obviously a
talk about
big
Lord of the Rings without the homoeroticism of the films. Like
yeah,
that's such a big
and
part of it.
that's why it's weird that so many right wingers are like, oh, this is such a great film. We should get more films like this. And it's like the two main
Mm,
characters are quite homoerotic. Like it's quite
yeah, I mean, and Tolkien said that was part like intentional, that it's about like like intimacy between men, which is something that wasn't as much written about back then. So I think it is silly that
yeah.
it's not something that people talk about, or people try to ignore it when they want to push their like they don't make him like Lord of the Rings anymore when it's all guys. It's like, well, I mean, think about why it's about all guys. It's not really backing up your
It's
yeah. I mean, the films are gorgeous. I mean, it's kind of there's kind of a no duh thing to say, but like the films are visually just spectacular, and like the scale of it is insane. Even like we've had like bigger budget films come out since, and I don't think anything in any film. I mean, that's obviously a big statement. I don't think any other film has reached the scale that Lord of the Rings reached personally.
mm, yeah, and I think that it's yeah, the technical aspects of these films are excellent. Like it's a yeah, it's very they're very beautiful looking films because filming in New Zealand will do that. Like if you just film
Hmm.
in a beautiful country, it is going to look good.
Hmm.
And just comes with the territory. I think it's yeah, great cinematography. The score by
Oh yeah.
Howard Shaw, was he the
Yes. Yep. Yeah, he's the
composer?
score is
There's some
amazing.
really nice bits of score. I did notice that some of the visual effects I felt didn't age amazingly well. I
I think the
think.
Gollum effects are the most questionable. That'd be my
Mm,
if I could think. I remember seeing in theaters and I was like, oh, some of these aren't amazing still, but I think they're none of them are like terrible. I think some have aged a little bit. Just you can kind of, but I mean, I think that personally doesn't bother me like in any movie if there's like aged visual effects. 'Cause that's just kind of how like time works. Things look
yeah,
worse as It's not
yeah.
something that
No,
bothers me personally, but
I don't dislike. I don't. I yeah. It's not a necessarily. I mean, I guess it is a complaint, but it's more just sort of
mhm.
like it sort of comes with the territory of and they were sort of innovating. I mean, this was where Weta
Oh
Workshop
yeah.
really became a thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's a lot of what they did is quite admirable and quite impressive. You know, and it looks a bit dated, but it does. There's a lot of stuff that looks better than newest. In the past couple years.
Mhm. Sure.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, no, I don't dislike these films at all. I want to. One thing that I feel like we should probably touch on that gets talked about a lot is the fact that Return of the King has like 20 endings. There's like 20 minutes of just
Mm.
endings, which
I don't
is
mind it. It's a long story. It kinda needs a lot of
I don't think
resolutions.
I don't have an issue with it. It's more just how it's structured in the sense of
That's
like it
fair.
fades
Yeah.
out and then it fades back in, and it's just like, well, I don't know. I because I and there are so many points where it's like, okay, the film could end here. Like you've got Sam and Frodo sitting on like Mount Doom as it's exploding, and I'm like, okay, this is an ending, and it fades to black, and I was like, okay, this is not an ending.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's an end. Okay, and again, I don't think that's a bad. I think that's a nice ending, and it fades back
Mhm.
in, and there's that bit at the end where the all the Fellowship come to see Frodo, and he says every character's name except Legolas. Like he sees Legolas and does not say anything, and I'm like, they never
Yeah.
interacted in like any of these 3 films. That is
Yeah, one of
interesting that we
those
never.
it's one of those, like, early internet movies where it's, like, it's hard to talk about, like, now because everything has just been so picked to death by, like, the obnoxious, like, 2010s, like, early like, late 2000s, like, film discourse, like, I don't know, like, whenever I hear, like, the too many endings thing, I just think, like, of, like, CinemaSins and, like, those kind of, like, early YouTube, like this is one of those, like, movies that everyone's seen, it's like, a lot of them, like, attacked, like, or, like, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of there's a lot of parts of Lord of the Rings, like or, like, the, "Do we know when Aragorn kicked his helmet, he broke his foot?" Like, stuff like that where it's just been, like, so over talked about where, like, it's hard
yeah,
to discuss it, like, in an objective
yeah.
light because it's
Uh,
just it's such a
why
pop
didn't the
culture it's like
Eagles just
watching
fly them to
Taylor
Mount
Swift, like
Doom? Why didn't the Eagles
yeah,
just
that's
fly them
another
to Mount
one.
Doom?
And whenever someone
Yeah,
brings it
no,
up, I honestly wanna die inside.
I don't really know if there is much more I can add to it. Really, I think I think they're okay.
Mhm. Yeah, that's your feelings are valid, don't let the general consensus shame you into thinking otherwise.
No, I think that I look I think if you can get it like look there's lots of stumbling blocks to Lord of the Rings. It's fantasy, which I generally just have no interest in. They're very long,
Mhm.
like they're 3 hours long, and I'm not like look, if a film can go for 3 hours and I love it, then that's great. But I'm
Mhm.
not like just there's lots of films where I'm like, man, this could have been 2 hours or less. Like this did not need to be as long as it did, and some will
Mhm.
argue that's not valid. Some will, and I'm like, well, I think it is. I think it's, and again, I think runtime is, it's runtime is like a case, but it's like it's as long as you can justify it. And to be fair, I don't think Lord of the Rings does justify it. I mean, I understand they're big books and everything. I think, and honestly, I think this would work better as a TV show. I think if they just directly adapted the books to
Mm.
a TV show, that would probably work. And I understand, of
Mhm.
course, within the context of the time, they could really do that because TV was just not the thing. Lord of the Rings sort of made
Right.
fantasy popular. So I think I understand why they sort of couldn't make it as a TV show then, purely because
Mhm.
of where the medium was at the time that they just were not able to. And Lord of the Rings being popular helped get like Game of Thrones made. So I think that, but I think it would work better as a TV show. They just directly adapt. They took a
Mhm.
book and they spent 10 or so episodes just adapting a book to, did a 3-season show, 10 episodes or so per season to adapt the book. You can flesh everything out more because with a film you are limited within. You can't have a, these films are already 3 hours, and
Mhm.
it's still limiting to a degree because
Sure.
making a 3 hour film is like, and the fact that these are such popular films despite being 3 hours long is impressive because I'm
Mhm.
surprised audiences are like on board with, because audiences, you see stuff all the time now, but audiences and like attention spans are just like dropping, and people are just like,
Sure.
which is not a good thing, I think. Um,
Not really, no.
but I think that, like, I don't know how I don't like if this was made now, would it? I think if it was made as a TV show, it probably would be like this big cultural popular thing. But I think if
Mhm.
the films were
Maybe if
made
Harry
now,
Potter's big, they'll do it.
yeah, that I don't know if if the films were made now, they would necessarily be as popular. I think
Mhm.
because I think the attitude towards films has changed. I mean, TV's the thing. People are like TV's better than
Mhm.
films, which I don't think it is. But I think if you made
Right.
it as,
It's hard
it
to
would
compare
probably.
mediums.
It is hard to compare the mediums, yeah, but so many people will say TV is better than films. I'm just like, well, I don't
Right.
know if it is, but I think it wouldn't be if Lord of the Rings if Harry Potter had happened first and Lord of the Rings hadn't. I think they would Lord of the Rings as a TV show now. I think they would just adapt the books as a TV show. I don't think the films would get made purely because I just don't know if a studio would be willing to put however much money into these films. I think that they'd be willing to do it for a TV show because people, on HBO or Amazon Prime or something like that, they'd make it as a TV show. Whereas I just don't know if it would get greenlit now like the films would get greenlit now.
I mean, Dune got greenlit, but that was also like 5 years ago, I guess. But things have changed a lot.
And that's also, like sci-fi. Like it's not the
No, I mean, like again, like they're kind of a hard one to discuss, like in any sort of constructive way, because they're just so ingrained with like film discussion, pop cultures, every sort of like everyone knows every beat of Lord of the Rings, basically. Like there's nothing you can say that hasn't been spoken before. But I mean, they mean a lot to me, and I love them. So that's kind of all I can really say. And I'm not really excited for like the anime one that's the War over here. I'm not really excited for the Gollum movie that's happening, but I'll always have these three, and those are very special movies.
I saw that had been announced. I was like, this is a joke, right? Like this isn't
the Marvel-ification of Lord of the Rings.
I thought it was like on the Disbussin Film Twitter. I was like, this is surely a joke.
Yeah, that does work. Like, that would work on that for sure.
And I was like, oh, it's like an actual official thing, huh? Which is a terrible idea. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know why.
That's a whole other discussion.
Really bad idea. It's a whole other can of worms. But I think it's just, and it's being directed by Andy Serkis, who is not a very good director.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So I'm just like, oh, this is really not going to be good because he's not a good director. This is going to not be good. Yeah, I give these films, all three of these films, I give them a 7, but it's sort of a stronger 7 as they go on. I think they get better as they go along, which I would not have said beforehand. I would have said Return of the King is my favorite one, and Two Eyed Towers was the worst one. But I think Fellowship is my least favorite of the three now that I've seen them.
Yeah, there's it's one of those trilogies where I don't think there's like a correct, like I think any ranking you give me I'd think is valid. Like I think all three of them are pretty close, but I would go 1, 2, 3, but they're all pretty perfect. They're all 10s for me. So yeah, that's kind of where I end with Lord of the Rings.
10 out of 10s. That's not that surprising. But even though I disagree,
I am a big fan.
It's not surprising, even if I disagree.
Yeah,
so I think
we have different perspectives.
Pretty much it. I mean, we're tying this because there's an animated Lord of the Rings coming out. I've like heard basically nothing about it. It's been meant to be coming out for ages. Like I swear I've seen release dates for like April, and now it's December. It just keeps not coming out. And yeah, I haven't seen the trailers. I'm looking at some screenshots at the moment. I don't know how I feel about the animation, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know how I feel about the style. Yeah. But
we'll see.
I've just noticed that it's got Brian Cox in it, who is excellent. I think Brian Cox is fantastic. He's probably not going to tell people to fuck off in this one, though, which is disappointing because
that is sad. Yes, that's what he does best.
Yeah, I mean, even he's in adaptation for like 5 minutes, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great in that.
A great small role in adaptation where he's just berating Nicolas Cage for like a minute straight. Yeah. Is there anything? Well, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. Ben, you've done 4? Yeah, you did Paddington.
This is my 4th, yeah.
We did
Chicken
Kung Fu Panda and Chicken Run. And these,
What a set of films.
An eclectic collection of films to talk about. Is there anything you would like to plug before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I will plug At the Movies with William Fletcher. It's a good show. I appreciate you having me on.
That is good, and I'm sure I'll have you on again in the future.
I would love to.
So yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed this week's episode. There wasn't much structure to it, but I guess because it's a trilogy and it's a
Casual.
trilogy that very much flows into each other. You know, you can't just sort of
Mhm.
watch. I mean, you could watch that one by itself and then not watch the others, but it would be a bit weird, I
Mhm.
think, to be like, I'll just watch Return of the King because it's like, well,
Mhm.
to the end of the
Yeah, it
story.
would be odd.
But yeah, thank you all for
Yeah.
listening to this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.